And we are recording right now, sir. In 3, 2, 1. Good.
Hello.
All right, hello.
Yes, sir. So that's great. What prompted your move over there? Because I know you were in UCLA Medical Center for a while. Like one of my coworkers, one of my friends, one of my thespians, actually worked there. He was a Caltech grad, and saying that you were a doctor there.
I was at UCLA. I went to residency at UCLA, family medicine residency.
I see.
And then I finished the residency, and then I left to go work. I was working for Kaiser for a while. Then I moved to San Diego, and I was doing research in San Diego for a couple of years. And so then I moved back to Arizona. I'm from Arizona.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I've had such a great experience on myself in the sense of my history with the medicine, with the ayahuasca or yahe, but it was more from your home country, which is the Shiona tribe, and they call it yahe instead of ayahuasca compared to Western people. But just that whole those pre-Columbian cultures is so awesome that so you're back. So I was gonna ask you about that, sir. So breaking the ice out here, how was your pilgrimage?
To Peru. I just went to Peru to lead a group down there to the center. It was really good. We had a very positive experience for the whole group. Yeah, and we took about 12 people down, and for a 10-day program at Niuerao Centro Espiritual with Shipibo, Master Ricardo and his team, Ricardo Amaringo, and it was really successful. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was a great time.
Good to hear.
And it was, if I'm not mistaken, just correct me if I'm wrong, it was his brother that was doing the sacred art, correct?
No, that's not correct. No.
That's
Pablo and Maningo, they're not related.
They're not
closely related.
Okay.
They have the same last name, but they're from the same Pucallpa, so they may have some, but they're not closely related.
Oh, they're not closely related. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing is, have you, my first question is, have you encountered any kind of blowback from your, because you're a medical doctor by profession.
That's right.
And you know how they view that. I mean, in my family, we have 4 doctors, 2 nurses, 2 PTs, and my mom works in medical billing. And there's an established dogma when it comes to shamanic medicine. So I just want you to expand on that and how you had to deal with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's... I really haven't come up against a lot of resistance. I think primarily because, for example, in my book, I'm just telling the story of kind of cases that our Western medical system is not succeeding with. So everybody who's really serious, who's really deep and entrenched in the medical system is very familiar, with the failure around problems like, depression and anxiety and addiction, number 1. Number 2, PTSD. Then, explore psoriasis, a case of psoriasis where somebody improved, like idiopathic chronic cough, people who had been going to the doctor and were not able to get better, migraine headache case. So those kind of cases, these chronic pain cases. So none of the cases presented are in any way against the medical establishment. I mean, everybody in the book went to the doctor for years.
Right. And
so the question is, if you're a serious physician and you're serious about medicine, and you've seen people struggle, you've seen people kind of stay in these chronic kind of conditions, and without maybe knowing necessarily how to help them anymore, but a lot of people are curious to know, is there another way to help these people? And so that's kind of been my whole approach with it. And so I think because of that, I don't know, I haven't had any real resistance.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I have further questions, but you go on ahead, sir.
Well, I'm kind of curious then. So, you feel that you haven't been experiencing very much resistance. Have you had an opportunity to put some of the things that you learned as a shaman in practice with your standard practice by any chance?
Well, I mean, I think it's just at this point, it's just the kind of training that I went through is ayahuasca shamanism, and using plant medicine diets, and so it's very just different. So it wouldn't be necessarily something you would just bring to the normal practice. But the part of that you bring to the normal practice and the sharing is all about is helping people to acknowledge and realize how maybe there's some emotional underpinnings to some of their illness, and helping them to be aware of that, helping them to understand that, and helping them to find different ways to approach that.
Right.
Not necessarily with psychedelics, but with a lot of different means. But a lot of people they don't even connect the dots that perhaps their childhood trauma, may be playing a role in their current health, for example.
Well, my second question concerning this is like, it seems out here in the West, we suffer a great deal from diseases caused, it's like a psychosomatic order, in a sense that you have diseases such as Crohn's, chronic fatigue syndrome, and even like phenomenon that we experience here in the West that developed countries don't particularly are susceptible to, meaning like mass shootings. What is it about the society compared to ones that are more indigenous? Like, because I've been to South America and Central America, so these like pre-Columbian cultures, that's very different. That they don't experience that. They don't have the same phenomenon. So what is it that sets us apart?
Yeah, well, what seems like it sets us apart is just the lack of kind of addressing, matters of, at least at the medical level, matters of the heart and soul, like number one. Like this whole fear of, how's the medical system going to react and respond to people just trying to help someone at a spiritual level. That's not really like considered blasphemy, in a lot of indigenous parts of the world, like to address someone's spiritual health or well-being, and it is also a huge part of a lot of people's religious practice and belief system. But, the scientific world is finding ways to connect again and realize the holes in not addressing the emotional and spiritual dimensions of health. Now there's more talk around mindfulness and medicine, and more talk about, all kinds of things. And so I think down there, this guy Malidoma, Patrice Somejo, I quote a lot, is an African shaman, and his opinion in observing the Western culture is just that is disconnected from some three basic human necessities. Number one is community. So the lack of community leads to a lot of emotional disturbance, lack of connection to nature, so that just they're going against basic biology as far as the rhythms and the entrainment with your environment. That, very artificial environments, probably disruptive, to your natural cycles of your body to some degree. And so then you see people with this, like the what they call forest bathing research coming out of Japan, and taking people into the forest, and they're seeing positive healthcare outcomes just from that.
Because it's part of their culture.
Spending time in nature. And then he also talks about just a lack of connection to spirit in some way, some kind of connection to mysterious, elements of life that exist beyond our understanding, and yet we experience them. And so instead of like denying the kind of mysterious experiences that a lot of people have, connecting and discussing and sharing. And so it's really a lack of connection is what he diagnoses the West with. People are very disconnected from what would be considered like traditional human life on the planet Earth, all over the world.
Wow.
Where people are living in communities, and they're kind of helping and sharing and working with each other that way, and have more connection to nature in many situations. And so in the West, like a lot of that has been sacrificed for like more of a materialistic kind of perspective as far as what is the point of life, and what are the goals. And so people are sacrificing all kinds of things, maybe not even knowingly, but just, for example, childcare. Right. That it's been abandoned for the kind of corporate productivity. Why would everyone like have to be away from their children so much, and still they're not really getting that much benefit per se? Like maybe some upper echelon of a corporation is making a lot of money, the other people are struggling, and they have to sacrifice their time and so they're not with their children. So that would be considered like a basic human ignorance, you know, to not have the society invest time and prioritize the children, and knowingly that, you know, I think everyone knows in a common sense fashion that in many cases the parents would be the ideal, you know, people to spend that time with them.
Right.
And there's the family support and the emotional support that comes from that. So we've kind of lost touch with that. You know, that's a real basic one all over the world. And here it's like everyone's trying to figure out, you know, how can they work more, and, you know, what are they going to do with their kids? And you know, I understand it. I mean, I'm from here, I live it, but I think those are really rough things that really kind of bring up a lot of problems for people, a lot of emotional problems that seem to underlie a lot of psychosomatic problems that you mentioned.
Yes, sir.
You know? And then the deeper problems. I don't know, the mass shootings is a very unique kind of phenomenon in the United States, and I don't know, there's so many unique things about the United States, you know, it's this very unique experiment. And Time magazine just reported, I put it on Facebook, that 46% of all the world's guns are in the United States.
Yeah, it is. That's a true statistic. I know because I used to be a gunsmith. So. Right.
Yeah. So it's just like, well, that's a lot of gun percentage-wise. You know, half of the world's guns.
Right.
So that's definitely.
It's like what are we so scared of? Yeah. What are we so scared of?
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, you know, I'm kind of glad that you went on to the topic of mass shootings, because, you know, I'm kind of curious about. I was kind of curious about how if there is some way that, or do you think that, like, there could be some mechanism, either using, you know, shamanic traditions, or at the very least just trying to inject, you know, a degree of community and spirituality into a person who, I guess we'll say, has a potential for mass shootings, you know, or someone who falls into that category. I mean, do you think it's
Yeah, well, I mean, I think ultimately, like, this shamanic perspective, this community, this injection that you're talking about is love. You know, you're trying to help someone find love and love for themselves. And so I guess there's like so many ways to do that, but it's hard. You know, it's hard because some of these kids are so far gone, you know, to get to that point, to do that. So yes, I think there's a lot of ways that you can help them, but then it's just, again, it's about addressing the importance of this emotional and spiritual dimension of healthcare. You know, like that's the dogma that they need to listen to. All these the blowback from our society to the healthcare industry is like, hey, guess what? This matters. Like, this costs money to take care of these things. This costs lives to take care of these things. And so addressing the emotional health and the reality of family relationships contributing to, you know, this kind of thing, and the need for it to become a healthcare priority, you know.
Okay.
So it's hard because what can the current healthcare system do to address these things, you know, to try to help communities or help these things? And it would, you know, it'd have to be policy around I don't know, I'm curious about policy. You know, when you hear about these Swedish school systems where they have them in school less, you know,
right.
And it's more effective.
Right. In Finland, Sweden, and Norway.
Working less, and it's more effective, and they're more productive. And so I think you have to first work towards giving people time, you know, consuming everybody's time with work, apparently ineffectively, apparently not in the most productive fashion as far as we understand from that kind of research, what that's indicating, and for what, you know? Like, of course, there are some jobs that require that full-time attention, you know, all the time, but there's a lot of jobs people are just sitting around, you know, just passing time, so as to be making money for some corporation and to get a paycheck, when they could be doing all kinds of things.
Right.
You know? How are you going to have a culture, like you're talking about these pre-Columbian cultures down there, and how interesting and exciting it is to see how humans are, and they have a lot of time to themselves and their families.
Right.
That's my big question. How would you even develop like a local cuisine in your region, you know, if nobody like cooks with the community? How would you develop develop like a local fashion, you know, like besides just what's on TV or whatever, or a local style of music, you know, like those all those things are dance, you know, those basic cultural like expressions that are, we don't see the same level of like regional expression here as you might see in other places where people basically have the time to do those things.
Wow, I'm so glad you taught. I didn't feel like we were gonna go in that kind of tangent. It's great. My next, that's awesome, sir. My next question is, it was really awesome to meet you the first time at the Psychedelic Science Conference in 2017 and listen to your talk, which was really great. But in that same token, because you were talking a lot about epigenetics, and you mentioned this in your book, which is a wonderful book, by the way. So please do your plug before this video ends, where you talked about the Mother Ayahuasca, or the Serpent Lady, the Green Lady is what I call her, showed you a vision of it's almost like notch signaling, right? Or like the epigenome.
Yeah, exactly.
So can we expand on that?
Yeah. So I think that's a really important topic, because that kind of touches on this stuff. Because when we talk about, you know, where would this like cultural disease show itself? It's like, well, the epigenetics is definitely where that kind of thing, like, do people who live in the Amazon a certain way have different epigenetics from people who live in the United States? Yes. You know, if you have the same DNA and you went down and lived down there for a generation or two, would your epigenetics change? You know, yes, because it responds to the environment. So the epigenetics, we know, is an element of our genetic expression, which responds to the environment. You know, responds to where we live, to where our cells live. It responds to our nutrition, or the kind of pharmaceuticals you take. It responds to all kinds of physical factors, you know, carcinogenic factors, definitely affecting epigenetics and promoting cancer. Diabetes being promoted by all kinds of chemicals and, you know, whatever excess sugar, etc., leading to epigenetic disease, and then all these other epigenetic diseases that people are curious about, things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and maybe even autism. So, and then, you know, furthermore, the mental health problems, you know, anxiety, depression, and to some degree addiction. So, and then a lot of these autoimmune psychosomatic things are showing epigenetic signs and kind of signals. So now you're saying, wow, this epigenetics is a really big deal, and it's a really, and so then the reason I think it's so important in this whole broader discussion is because it's a way where you can talk to these science people, and you can talk to the medical community and say, hey, you know what, like this diabetes type 2 that we're seeing so much of is looking very epigenetic. In other words, people are so worried about, oh, well, their family had it, and then the grandparents had it, and so, yeah, they're going to have it. And it's like, well, I don't know, the great-grandparents, I'm not sure they had it, actually, you know? And so it's like these, you know, the Native Americans you see in the photos, you know, they're not really, like, suffering with that kind of illness. But then when exposed to this kind of nutrition and different kind of lifestyle, people start suffering with that kind of illness.
Right.
And so then you can't just approach it by modulating their chemistry. You know, that's not necessarily going to solve the problem. So people don't believe that it could be reversed, but then we see it get reversed in many, many people.
Right.
Once they start dropping the weight and changing the way they eat and all that kind of stuff, all it goes away.
Right.
So they thought it was a genetic disease, and then it turns out it was an epigenetic disease. Right. Very related to lifestyle and all that kind of stuff. And so now we're also learning that the epigenetics of trauma, you know, so that there's ways in which the system might overreact to very traumatic situations, and that would alter the epigenetics and stay with the person and even be passed on to their children. You know, so they've been looking at that around Holocaust survivors from Europe and increased prevalence of anxiety in those descendants. There was just something on the internet today I saw, I can't remember where it was, but they were showing that kids of parents who had major traumatic events more likely to have mental health problems. So we used to think, oh, this is all due to parenting stuff, you know, like, oh, the people went through the Holocaust, they were in a concentration camp, And so they're not going to be the same kind of parent, maybe, that somebody else who didn't have that experience. And that's probably true. But they're finding there's epigenetic factors, there's biological factors underneath that.
Right.
And so those are like what the shamans would call like energies of trauma.
Right.
You know, like what do we call? How do we discuss that? Well, that's what you talk about. You know, this is the energy, this is the impact of this trauma and the imprint that it makes on the biochemistry of the system. So now the question is, how do you undo that? How do you heal that? You know, if we want to try to deal with this cultural-wide disease that you're talking about, and like how can we undo some of the damage that we have apparently done to ourselves and to the society? And so then we have to come up with ways, you know. And so one of the things they're saying, well, psychotherapy, wow, you know, that can help reverse. You know, the antidepressants, some of those are doing some they're reversing some. They're doing a lot of stuff with all different kinds of supplements. So these supplements and these herbs, they're altering epigenetics. They're doing meditation alters epigenetics. So then you could show that I made the argument in my book that, well, you can show how this meditation and psychotherapy are altering epigenetics without any kind of chemical interaction, right? So they're always, again, the dogma of the established medical world, who they're alive, they know all kinds of weird stuff happens to them, but when we get into the professional discussion, I guess somehow we veer away from some common sense topics. But one of them is that when you use psychotherapy to alter someone's genetic chemistry without any kind of chemical, like how does that happen? You know, that's an immaterial reality. And then when somebody does meditation and it alters their epigenetics, and you could say, some people would argue, well, it's like they change their breathing rate, and there's these different parameters that they alter in their physiology, but still there's an intention behind that.
Right.
That's driving the whole thing. That's the one. That is the energy that's guiding and leading to this thing. So then I make the argument that it seems like epigenetics, in addition to being sensitive to all these chemicals, it seems like they're sensitive to very subtle energies. And then we can show how strong emotional exchanges, like let's say during childhood, from a parent, some abuse or whatever it is, maybe just violent or just aggressive behavior, and then these people, their epigenetics is altered from that. Okay? They were never necessarily even struck physically, but the energetic dynamic between the two people led to this protective mechanism to come on, like, oh, watch out, this is dangerous, this is stressful. And the body, marked itself that way. And so you could make the argument that perhaps a lack of love would lead to some of these epigenetic changes. And so then the argument is that proper love and support would allow the epigenetics to shift, with the right kind of catalysts around. And so that's one of the arguments, is that sometimes the psychedelics could potentially facilitate, that kind of reopening, deconditioning of some of the hard patterns. Mm-hmm. So that's all theory, but we are going to do, and this is one thing we're trying to raise money, and that's why I want to get the word out. So the MDMA PTSD trial, so you got MAPS.
Yes, sir.
They're running their big trial with PTSD, and they're using MDMA assisted psychotherapy with psychotherapy, and they're making this huge impact and making these big gains with these people who are treatment. So again, back to the doctors, back to the serious, physicians, the people who are committed and dedicated to their careers. These are people, to get into the study, you have to be treatment resistant. That means you failed all treatment that you've tried so far. So they're not trying to cherry pick, and they're not trying to go fool people, oh, this is psychedelics and let's all party and this is how we should do it. They're saying, give us the people who you can't help. No one's helped, who you've told, and many people have told, you're damaged goods. Like something really bad happened to you and you're never going to get better. Because we don't know how to help you from where you're at. And they took those people and they're getting this remarkable response. And so that is a very interesting thing, because that kind of PTSD, there's some evidence around PTSD with epigenetics. So then I'm saying, hey, wow, if you can get somebody to change from this like chronic pattern that they've had for years, and then this 12-week program is completely different, and they're showing like physiologic changes. Their heart rate is not as agitated. Their blood pressure is probably better because their PTSD is better. They sleep better. It's like probably there's some epigenetic change that happened as part of that healing. It would make sense to me, and a lot of people are curious about that. So we're starting the Modern Spirit Epigenetics Project, where we are going to collect saliva samples on the MAPS trial participants, and then run labs on that. But that's going to cost money, so we're raising money. modernspirit.org is where we're going to. You can donate money there.
Absolutely, sure. We're gonna share this to Ray Bradbury's group. So.
Oh, thank you. No, wonderful.
No worries. Go ahead. Next question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
What's it called? And I just want to clarify something, and not less of a question. That because it's from a certain point, it does sound like if you're able to treat them from an epigenetic level, you can at least get to certain types of emotional trauma. And I'm gonna make this presumption then that you're certainly not saying it's a catch-all, and you're also certainly not saying that people who have physical trauma this won't help either, right? Just want to clarify that.
Well, so then first of all, it's like it's not a catch-all at all, and it's not a panacea, and it's something people should be very careful with, and it can be very messy and problematic.
Yeah.
So, but it's more. So that's one thing is ayahuasca shamanism. But this is also just like looking at epigenetics. And just the way it's illuminating that, these people going all the way down to Peru and places like that, and what that's teaching us about medicine and healthcare and biology,
Yeah.
And so we don't know the limits of what that kind of healing could do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like I'm not saying it's panacea. I don't think people should believe, but there's obviously examples of things that appeared physical. So you break your arm. We want to be smart and wise and use our scientific knowledge and our experience. So I'm talking about real medicine's about experience. So they can set the bone and do it very well. Well, the shamans are going to go to the doctor. They found out those guys can do it really fast, very effective. We've seen it many times. We've seen them help people many times like that. So it's about experience that shapes our knowledge base and the truth. And so in the case of let's say somebody has these kind of gray area physical problems, like some forms of back pain. You got some forms of back pain that you see people healing all different ways. The same patient that's being offered surgery, that might improve with physical therapy, or maybe they can improve with yoga. I guess that's a physical approach, but then the yoga, brings in the spiritual aspect, all that kind of stuff. And then we had a guy, I have a podcast written one that's out on the Modern Spirit thing about, really chronic neck and back pain that he was on. I think he had injections, being considered for surgery, was on opiates, so he was on pain medication, opiates. Wow. And then he ended up healing through first stage through an emotionally based therapy that was given to him in LA, and then he went a step further and had further healing going through shamanism down in Peru, and he got to more of a spiritual connection about it, and he had a very dramatic improvement in what was apparently a physical pain that he needed opiates for. So there's these gray areas of once you allow the body to heal, what will the body be able to do?
That's one thing I really liked about your book, because some of the cases that you presented, there were a few of them where it didn't seem like they went to an ayahuasca section and then suddenly they were cured. Sometimes it always seemed like they would relapse, and then they'd have to come back, and then they'd have to go either fix another part of their emotional trauma. So I thought that was a very balanced mechanism. In which case, is there something that you think ayahuasca, or is there a particular but not symptom, what's a good one? Yeah, thank you. A particular problem you think that either shamanism or ayahuasca sessions would be best suited for, if there's a...
Well, and I think again, when you talk about ayahuasca and shamanism and all that stuff, it's very dependent. Once we get into this shamanic healing arts world, it's very dependent on the practitioner.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Just like, and it's true. I mean, because we don't say that so much about Western medicine because it's very standardized, like who's out there practicing.
Right.
There are limits to who, and even there we see run into problems from time to time, right? But still, those people have been tested and, you know, board certified and all that kind of stuff. And so if you have an advanced practitioner, you know, with a good reputation and a solid like body of work behind them, then yeah, there's a lot of very interesting things that are possible. And so I throw out those kind of problems, what I say, you know, problems where people need additional help with their emotional bodies. And so that's what the book is. And then, you know, like some of them were very prolonged treatments, you know. Some of the treatments presented in the book were 6 months. Sometimes 3 months, or like you said, repeat treatments over time, and people that were doing other things, you know, that they were ready to really kind of engage and make the other changes in their life, or when they did and it didn't work, you know, they had to learn to make those changes. And so I mentioned that, like, I think shamanism or, you know, energetic based approaches with the right practitioners have the potential to help problems, like I say, of the emotional body. So I'm throwing in that category, you know, I say where the psycho-neuro-endocrine immunologic network is disturbed. So I say, well, anxiety and depression, you know, PTSD is a form of anxiety, you know, end-of-life anxieties, what they're doing some research on. Then you've got addiction is a big focus right now of a lot of the psychedelic stuff. And then the psychosomatic illness that I've seen, you know, not, again, we don't have like big data to tell everybody, though, this is going to work for you, but we've seen people improve, you know. So when I tell people, when they ask me about some particular diagnosis, do you think you can help with this diagnosis? And I might say, well, I don't know for sure with that diagnosis. I can say, I bet you we can help heal, do some emotional and spiritual healing for you that could very well lead to like big improvements with your diagnosis.
In the book, so my next question is, in the book you had a gentleman in the book you named Russ. It was,
his name is Russ. The Russ gave his real name.
That's his real name. He was a Vietnam vet, and right. he was dealing with basically like epigenetic or DNA damage from trauma, essentially, because broken relationships and all that. And I was going to ask you,
psychological damage.
Yeah. So have you been? Because the thing is, I have a lot of friends. You know, I don't want to go over my previous background, but DoD participants in the global war on terror. Have you been seeing a lot of that in Niue Rao? Because I've been trying to push my buddies.
We don't get a huge amount of war vets. You know, it's mostly been like other kind. We got a few. Mm-hmm. So there are people that are starting to go, you know, for war trauma. And like I said, we've had a few. We haven't like focused on that or opened the door to that. There's places like, well, I mean, there's definitely. I think there's that movie coming out, Shock to All. I haven't seen it yet. You know, they're focusing on war trauma, and so yeah, that's a huge focus, and there's a huge interest around that. I myself have been involved in a little bit of that, not tons of that, so I'm not an expert in that, but I know that a lot of people are doing that kind of work, and I'll probably do more of that kind of work in the future.
Sorry, if you have another question. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I do. Is this a common paradigm? Because I've never participated in a ceremony with the Shipibo, but I've found out, like, when I've taken the medicine, and every time, like, I just call her the green lady. It's just not that she's green. It's just a name I use. Every time I tend to see her, I tend to have like a good experience. But what ended up happening is, typically I deal with my own psychological issues, and I go to like a night of hell, right? And it's very tough. And it seems like after that, like I get like a weird bonus section, like that I didn't even like ask for, where she would show me something cool. Like, it's like, oh, okay, these are the different structures of the universe. Because I remember one time I dealt a lot with my godfather, and he was also my best friend, passing away, and I was just trying to deal with issues surrounding that and trying to move on, because it was already a year, and I was also his the executor to his estate. But after I was shown, you know, my inadequacies and how I can proceed to, you know, basically just get on with my life. It was almost like just like a Nike ad, like, you know, just do it, you know. But after that, after having a tough several hours, like in the end, I was shown like the different structures of the universe. It was almost like a bonus section. Like it's like, here, look how cool this is, and it was almost like a video, like where I saw a supercluster, and then a galaxy, and then a solar system, and then a star, and then a planet, like all the way to the Planck scale. And then what it would do is it zoomed me back out. It was so spectacular, and I was like, in every experience that I have, that I see the green lady, if I have a tough night, basically, like immediately after that, I would be rewarded with something I didn't ask for. That's like a secret of the universe or something. Is that normal, sir?
That's a lot of people have that kind of experience. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, that would be considered like a bonus experience, traditional. At first, you're there to do your work, on yourself and try to heal and make progress. But that many times you might receive some kind of bonus, experience like that, given some kind of exposure to the cosmos, in a way that you haven't, and hopefully in a way that is inspiring.
Well, I mean, I don't mean to cry, but I was just crying in a sense that I was like, well, what did I do to deserve seeing this kind of thing? Like, it was just so spectacular.
Yeah, well, I think you just have to love yourself through that,
Yeah.
Like, why not you?
Oh,
What?
well, thank you, sir. He's very kind, because he's a doctor. Go ahead.
In that case, I wonder if there are any other are there any other patterns that you've noticed in people's visions that at least from your experiences, anything that you find particularly either interesting or
Yeah, no, I mean, not so much. I think it's very varied, and I think that's kind of like when you work down there and you live down there, and I mean, there's definitely some, like, at least drinking it there in the jungle, there's definitely jungle themes, nature themes, plant themes, and, animals from the forest, and that's common, and sometimes people have those experiences here. So I think that's definitely a common theme in the forest for sure, and a lot of times when people do it elsewhere.
Oh,
Nature-based.
In which case, then, does that imply that if it's done elsewhere, would it be do the visions change substantially? Are they more city-based or?
I think it depends. I don't think we have any people. A lot of people want to they want to label and categorize it all, and I don't think that it's really, we don't gain that much from that kind of categorization.
Right.
Like understanding that, it's like, because you could say, oh, this is because, what we tell people, sometimes what I tell people is, when I hear people describing to me a very set trajectory with their ayahuasca, oh, this is what happens, and I do this, and I do that, and then this happens, and then that happens, and that's the way it works, is that I kind of know that they're not that experienced.
Right.
Because advanced people with a lot of experience, they realize it's quite diverse.
Very much so.
Very diverse, and so it's hard to pin it down, and so it's hard to, so then I think the most powerful, inferences that you can make into, that kind of, they're personal, But let's say you do see more city stuff because you're in the city, maybe you do, but then, well, that's interesting. But again, I don't know, what is it good for as far as for you and your journey? It's knowledge, it's information, but have you progressed, in any direction? I'm not sure.
Well,
so possible. Of course, I think your local environment is going to influence the experience. I think that's true.
In the book, when you talk about what was your basically fire impetus to get into the shamanic path, and you were talking about trying to find your way through I believe it was medical school or grad school.
Yeah, medical school.
And you felt unfulfilled. And I was going to ask that, sir, do you have a family? Are you married with kids?
No, I don't, and so that's another part of my unfulfillment. I'd like to be more settled. But that's part of my journey and problem is my love life, and ayahuasca hasn't really solved it, and so I think it's just there's life, real life, and I think part of me, I'd sacrifice some relationships to to do what I was doing. I was traveling a lot, you know, a lot of it. And some people find love in that situation and are able to make it work, but I have not yet. Yeah, I'm trying to settle down now more in my life to promote that kind of thing.
So, and so I was going to ask an expansion of that because that was really fascinating. You going over like that was like the kindling that started you off into this like shamanic journey. The particular issues that you dealt with in medical school, they haven't crept up, right? It's basically that you put that behind you.
I think that everything that you go through, like depression and stuff like that, I mean, what we find, I think this is true for a lot of people, is that, you know, you learn how to, you know, part of it, like I said, part of it you clean, you know, it's cleaned, it's gone, you've changed.
Right.
Part of it you transform, like you learn something from it. You know, you gain a new compassion because of something you've been through or you've experienced. And then there's a part of things that kind of haunt people still, you know, that come back around and you're like, oh, I thought I was over this, like what I thought I was more clear than this. And so then you have to learn how to work through that part,
Like
you know. And so I think that yeah, I'm not depressed. I mean, I'm not on medication. I'm doing pretty well overall, but I'm like, there's still like ups and downs, you know. But they don't like require. They're not like shutting me down. I'm not suffering intensely, you know, as I felt I was in the past. But I think it's just the truth that you're just always working to progress, you know.
Yes, sir.
You don't have to be perfect to be making progress.
There's no end to getting better.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, I see people that, you know, they're really happy. I mean, I'm going through like my own, you know, I did all that, and like, you know, I think I learned, you know, to do that kind of work and, you know, be effective in that kind of work and walk people through some pretty amazing experiences. And still my own journey is like still a journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm coming back to the United States. I think, okay, I'm gonna leave the Amazon. I'm gonna come home to USA, where I'm gonna live in Arizona, and you know, now I gotta figure out, you know, how do I go from doing what I was doing to this? You know, how do I mix it, and what do I do, and if I want to do ayahuasca here, and how can I do it legally? So it's still a journey for me. You know, I don't have it all figured out.
Well, in that case, what are your what are your vague plans then for the future? What do you intend to do? Because, you know, you're working with
one right now is right now I'm continuing to lead trips to the Amazon, you know, and to Costa Rica. I'm doing a trip to Costa Rica at a new center that started there. And then I'd like to, well, we have the Modern Spirit Epigenetics Project, so we're fundraising for that and trying to do that and get all that going. And then I'm probably going to get involved in a clinic here in Phoenix, like a medical clinic with some naturopathic doctor friends of mine, kind of help support like some naturopathic care and alternative medicine and help people that way here. And maybe do some like integrative counseling and, you know, stuff like that, trying to work that kind of part of the work into the thing. And, you know, I'm still promoting the book and kind of pushing that along and giving some talks. And so that's what I'm doing, you know. One day maybe if I had a way to do ayahuasca legally here, you know, do it more and work with people like that and maybe be more settled and be able to have a family or something like that, you know. That's I'm kind of like coming off the adventure of it all, you know. It's like
Joe Tafur, settled down version.
that's yeah, that would be nice. Or more settled down, you know.
Yeah.
It's not all, you know what I mean. It seems like it sounds real exciting in the book, but it's all. You have friends, they went another direction, you know. Some of them are doing great, you know. That was the right thing for them to do. And then other people are like, oh wow, that's cool, you did this, but it's all trade-offs, you know, and compromises. I'm glad. I think it was very important for me to do what I've done, you know,
Yes, sir.
I do believe that, and I'm glad. But it's like I don't have all the answers yet in my own life.
Mm.
Yeah, that's very comforting because it's just when I participated, because what started me off this journey was I love one of mine passed away, like several of them actually, and when I was first year of college, and I was a strict materialist. I was an atheist. I didn't believe in this stuff.
Right.
And then I saw some things, and this is not through an altered state of consciousness, although if you see something paranormal, maybe that is an altered state of consciousness. And that's what started me off with John C. Lilly's group.
Uh-huh.
And approaching it that way without taking entheogens, like using the tank for that, the sense deprivation chamber. And then from smoking DMT, and then to the grand mal of ayahuasca, which was very different. And it's like I've never gotten used to it, like ever.
Yeah, I think it's not something you get used to really. It's you know what I mean. It's not. It's a tough road.
Well, I was just gonna say, do you still have that in a sense that, because me, like when I approach it, it's not, maybe the word is not dread, but it's just like, man, because I try to have a ceremony, some kind of sacred ceremony, either 2 to 4 times a year. So it's either biannually or every quarter.
Right.
And because it helps me with the integration part. And so I was wondering, do you ever still approach it that way? Because I'm maybe the word's not scared, but I kind of have that. Like I was just like, boy, here we go again.
It's normal, yeah. Everyone is a little bit scared, yeah. And it surprises down there the natives. They say, it's like you can take anybody down, even the most advanced master. So we were very careful with it, with a lot of respect, a lot of care. There's different ways of, if you get it more into the practice and you're doing it for like a ceremony for the people, you learn like what's a dose, that you can handle easier. That's part of it. Sometimes you can go full blast, but anytime you do that, it opens it up. So something people should be very careful about.
I think we got room for only 2 more questions because we got about 15 minutes left. But do you have? Because I know you set the time limit at 65. So
go ahead. Yeah.
I have to do something later. That's why.
No worries, sir. The thing, I guess my final question for you in a sense is like, can you compare or describe more of like the Shipibo way of integration as opposed to now there's several working Western models. One particularly is kind of like, I won't, again, labels is really not very useful, but I'm just going to do it for the sake of it for this particular conversation. Like more like the Gabor Mate kind of, because so can you elaborate on that, sir?
I think everyone's trying to figure out how to incorporate for Westerners, like we were just talking about. Some people go down there, they have an experience, and then how do you get them to make the most of that experience? That's the issue. So that's really what integration is about. It's like, so it wasn't just something that happened to you when you saw the superclusters, and then, you go back to the same old situation, and maybe how can you make the most of it? That's the big question. And so down there, the Shipibo style, the traditional way, has to do a lot with the diet, So the diet, not just the food, but this period of isolation and reflection and restriction of behavior and food and stuff. And so you're spending time like that, in nature. So kind of like a meditative, contemplative period where you're going to really take the time out in a retreat to try to incorporate and integrate. And people will journal, and there's all kinds of things people do. And we have discussions and dialogues to try to figure out, how to prepare them, when they're going to go home and move on with their lives. And so that, that's the way the traditional people would do it. And then, of course, they live in the community they're doing it. And so their integration is ongoing.
Right.
You know, that it's not like they have to come home and figure out, oh, I wonder who I can talk to at work about ayahuasca. It's like, well, you can talk to everybody because you just did it with your whole family. So that's a big difference. So people are saying, because that is the situation that it's coming from, is from a community, you know, that's with the family and the people present, then versus going home and trying to explain to your family what you just did. And so there's that extra step and then a few more steps. So that's why people are trying to come up with like ways, you know, whether it's Gabor Mate and other people, psychedelic psychotherapy approaches, of like how can we help Westerners bring these messages home and help them integrate into their lives, into their work, into their relationships, which is what happens normally down there because you live with them.
Right.
So that's why it's important, I think. So I think I like, you know, the diets and taking that time. And I think there should be more of that, like just kind of pure Native American style, you know, whether it's Sweat Lodge or Vision Quest, you know, where there's a lot of focus, or just meditation, you know, a lot of focus on just being with yourself and with what you've been presented. But there is sharing, you know, and there is guidance. And then there's society, you know, and there's a relationship to society. So it's trying to address that as well, because like, you know, look at me, I went all this way with it, you know, so deep. Then I come home and I still have to figure out, okay, how am I going to be in this society? You know, that relationship still has to be addressed. Like, in other words, like you're talking about, to be fulfilled, to feel fulfilled. I could say, okay, I feel fulfilled about my journey up to now, and I wrote the book, and it was very fulfilling. And now I'm trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to continue to feel fulfilled in this modern life in Arizona? So that's a process. So I talk to people. You know, like I'm interested in therapy and things like that for me, you know, and seek guidance from healers. And I do go to Sweat Lodge, and I do different things, you know, to try to stay connected to spiritual practice, or pray, you know, or meditate, you know, connect to my family, connect to my friends, all that kind of stuff.
So ultimately, in the end, it doesn't sound like there's a single motive or method that you would recommend. Just do something, anything.
I'm gonna help give a workshop at the Psychedelic Psychotherapy Conference in Victoria. There's one in October, and so then everyone's trying to come up with the.
Is that in England, sir?
Huh?
Yeah.
Is that in England?
It's Victoria, Vancouver Island.
Oh, BC. Okay.
BC. That's where that is. And so I'm not really prepared to, like, because, you know, that's what America style, everybody wants that. Like, we want to have a package,
Fair,
you know,
yeah.
like, what's the package, you know, what's the right diet, what's the right package, you know, what's the most, like, peak performance. And I don't know, because I think it depends a lot on where you live and who's around. And so I'm much more interested in promoting, like, organic stuff. I think that's part of why everyone's having a hard time. And that's what's so nice about what's down in the Amazon when you get back to village life, is you start taking advantage of your local community. You know, you stop relying on like concepts and TV screens and all this stuff, and you start relying on the human beings that are in your life. And so that's why I think when it comes to techniques, I'm interested in, for example, I think that are very complementary to ayahuasca shamanism are things like somatic experience therapy. That's coming out of like the Peter Levine school and his books, and I know a lot of people have gone down this shamanic path, and they are they're doing that with people, and they're finding that's really helping people integrate. I think transformational breath work is really, there's other kinds, there's a holotropic, and there's this, and there's all these different kinds of breath work. I've been through transformational breath work, and I find that very interesting, because I've had very shamanic experiences with that, and a lot of emotional connection and emotional kind of release. And so that's something that I think really lends itself to that. And then you have these psychotherapists, when you have the right individuals who are perhaps experienced, with it, and there's that book, Listening to Ayahuasca by my friend Rachel Harris.
Yes. So we were.
That,
yes, it was great.
Yeah, and so that's like, so I don't know. I just can't be. I just feel like the whole standardization is the problem. Everybody wants standardized. Everybody wants, how are we going to scale this up? How are we going to do this? It's like, because I don't know, people are so excited about that kind of stuff because it's like the scooters, the scooters that are scattering the cities everywhere that nobody knows what to do.
Right.
They're worth $2 billion. Yeah. So everyone, we all think it's great, but then you hear all these communities that hate it. They don't want the scooters all over their neighborhood.
Right.
But everyone's like proud of them because they made $2 billion. But it's like with no one planned, and then it is organic, but it was just so large scale. It wasn't really like addressing the local community. So I think that's what's so important. It's organic. People are like, oh, what's the right way to do ayahuasca ceremony, and what's this, and what do the people say? It's like, you know what? It's like martial arts. Okay, it's like healing arts. There's different schools, and it depends on the master. And it depends on who you have access to. And that's why you learn and train in that particular style. And you learn what you learn.
Yeah.
And then you try to learn from the other ones and the MMA, and try to pick and choose and get the right kind of combination of things. But that's to me, the healing arts, like the art of healing, that part of it, that is what's missing for a lot of people. And they don't get that personal touch that's going to make the difference for them. It needs to draw on that. It's drawn human talent.
Yeah, I realized, admittedly, a few of my questions were built around, what's the most efficient method, so I apologize for that.
It's worthwhile.
Yeah.
I think it's worthwhile, but that approach is what's landed us in our current situation.
Right. That's so funny that he would go that avenue, because, as you know, I come from a very deep martial arts background. And it's funny because the last ceremony I had before this was not Aya. Earlier this year, I went to Pine Mountain Club, and the communities at Tejon, and I kind of stored away in a cabin by myself. I took Silo, and I wanted to see how we're gonna approach Dr. Tafur, and he told me don't go by your normal routine. I was like, well, what do you mean? So the spirit of that, or I call them los niños, because that's a tradition. They're kind of like elves or whatever. And they said, because normally what I would do when I interview physicists is I have a set number of questions. So it's very set, and I give it to them several weeks in advance. Typically between 8 to 12 questions. And then after that, I do a quick fire that I say Star Wars or Star Trek. And then so they have to figure that out in a few seconds.
Oh, and that's fun.
And no, but in this particular one, what they say, it says don't go that route. Just do it ad hoc. And so this is very new territory for me.
I think there's room, there's room for both sides. And so we're just saying, let's make more room for the ad hoc. Yeah. Let's make more room for the spontaneous. Let's make more room for dialogue. That there's some things that come out of consensus and dialogue. Yeah. That's what the community breeds. No need that's one thing. I just want to finish with this, maybe, because I got to go.
Yes, sir. Oh, of course.
I was down there, and I was down in the center, and we're connected to a village. And I was thinking, what is it that we feel so secure, in the village life, the kind of security people are looking for with, a corporate job? You think, oh, I got to get the good job because I get the paycheck, and it's for sure, small business, you don't know, maybe you get money, maybe you don't. It's kind of a gamble. It's more risky. But then when I'm down there in the village life, I feel that security of this kind of, that I would imagine somebody feels when they have this big regular paycheck, and they got their insurance and they have all that stuff taken care of and they just relax. And I think the reason why both systems, what I feel like is the reason that it's comfortable in the village is because you have so many people. You're in a network of people that are just ready to respond to whatever your needs are. We have 50 to 100 people that's oh, this happened or that happened. Hey, come on, lend a hand. So everything's easy because you have a lot of people. A lot of things are a lot easier. Same thing. That's what makes the corporation so comfortable for people because they have so many people. Right. To me, that's what it is. So it's more important to build a community, build the networks. That's what's going to give you that security that everyone's thinking, oh no, it's because of this piece of paper. It's because of this logo. It's because of this. It's because you got a lot of people that are willing to back it up. And so I think that's what, back to that again, just like the community, the organics, the wiki. That's important right now, I think.
Dr. Tafur, we're at 59 minutes and 52 seconds. Don't forget to plug your book right now.
Okay. So please check it out. The Fellowship of the River. I don't know, I have a copy somewhere right here. Hold on.
Yes, sir. Well, we can post it. I mean, we can post the image.
I
Yeah.
don't screw up the title. Fellowship of the River, a medical doctor's exploration into traditional Amazonian plant medicine. So it's available on Amazon, and there's Kindle, and there's Audible. So it's all there. So thank you guys very much.
And is it your voice, Doctor?
It's my voice, yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, nice.
We're going to get that too, because we already have like hard copies, and I have a digital copy too, so we'll do the trifecta.
Okay. All right, guys.
All right, so
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, bye.
Have a good night.